Hey guys, tonight we venture into the ancient lion pits of Assyria. Hot, echoing stone corridors, where royal beasts once roared beneath embroidered canopies, their golden manes shimmering in the desert light. You're walking barefoot, of course. The sandstone is warm underfoot, and the air smells like frankincense, old fur, and a hint of roasted barley cakes. Not your usual evening stroll, right? You're following a line of royal attendants through the back passageways of Nineveh's palace zoo. Yes, zoo. The Assyrian kings didn't just admire lions from afar. They housed them, named them, trained them, grieved them. In some bizarre combination of reverence, intimidation, and affection, these kings cultivated personal relationships with apex predators. It's a little like naming your nightmares, then teaching them to sit. And you're here to meet one. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As you walk past carved reliefs of lion hunts, each one dramatically staged in alabaster with arrows, chariots, and terrified fur, you start to notice something strange. Not every lion depicted is dying. Some are sitting, relaxed, even licking the king's hand. Could they really have been that tame? Comment your location and local time down below. I love seeing how far and wide we're stretching across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck beneath a linen curtain and step into a sunken courtyard. It's quieter here. Ahead, two lions lounge on a raised platform. Both young males, lean and golden, their eyes half-lidded in the late-day heat. An attendant stands nearby with a fan made of palm fronds. Another pours water into a stone basin. The lions do not flinch. One of the guards mutters, "That one's Asher Ramu. The other is Belcler Seed." You blink. He just told you their names like they were old classmates. Welcome to the odd, under-discussed practice of lion naming in the Neo-Assyrian Empire. These weren't just symbols of raw power. They were companions, divine surrogates, war trophies, and sometimes genuine pets. Historians still argue whether these named lions were truly domesticated or simply tolerated their handlers under threat of starvation. Some claim the more docile lions were bred in captivity over generations. Others insist it was ritual conditioning. Feed them in temple garb, whisper prayers, and never show fear. It wasn't just kings. Assyrian nobles sometimes gifted each other lion cubs, though this was a high-risk flex. There's a cuneiform tablet from Kalhu where a priest literally files a complaint about receiving a lion of uncertain temperament as a tribute gift. A lion of uncertain temperament. Imagine that in your inbox. But the royal lions? Different story. You approach a carved column where a relief shows King Ashurbanipal not killing a lion, but placing his hand gently on its brow, and beside that, etched in faint Akkadian script, Shul Namari, he who shakes the earth. The name wasn't chosen lightly. You're about to learn how each lion's name was part omen, part poetry, part statecraft, and every name carried weight, etched into tablets, whispered in rituals, and sometimes shouted across the Colosseum as the lion entered the royal arena like a four-legged champion. But not tonight. Tonight, these lions just breathe softly in the dust and twilight. One flicks his ear as a fly buzzes past. The other yawns and pads lazily toward the basin. There's no roar, no blood, no drama. Only the quiet mystery of a culture that looked a lion in the eye and gave it a name. You move deeper into the palace grounds, down a corridor of thick brick walls glazed in cobalt and gold. The patterns form endless rows of lions, marching, leaping, snarling, each one captured mid-mation in a parade of frozen ferocity. But these are just decorations. You're about to enter the real thing, the royal zoo of Nineveh. Ashurbanipal's menagerie wasn't a simple petting zoo. This was a curated, sacred complex, an organized tangle of cages, courtyards, pools, and holding pens. each with its own symbolic significance. You pass a pair of towering gates guarded by Lamassu statues, those winged lion-bull hybrids with eternally bored expressions, and suddenly the air smells wild. Musk, manure, the ghost of meat. Inside, you hear it. Not a roar, but the low breath of something enormous shifting in the shadows. In a sunken amphitheater ahead, 6 lions prowl behind a bronze lattice. One paces in perfect circles. Another lounges near a pile of crushed pottery. The third, older and larger, wears a dull iron collar and looks directly at you. You look away. These lions aren't random captures from the wild. Most were raised here, descendants of earlier generations of royal lions. Ashurbanipal, the king known both for his bloody conquests and his love of literature, made sure of that. His records describe the zoo in surprising detail. Separate areas for cubs, pregnant lionesses, even an isolation pen for temperamental males. You suspect temperamental is a polite translation. Mainstream scholars confirm that the Assyrians maintain breeding programs for lions within palace walls. What's more, clay tablets from Nineveh list feed schedules, medical notes, and reports from zookeepers, yes, zookeepers, who recorded everything from birth weights to behavioral changes after eclipses. Fringe researchers even claim that lion handlers developed proto-veterinary practices, poultices made of fig leaves and honey, massage techniques for wounded paws, and rituals involving moonlight and silver bowls. Whether those worked is anyone's guess, but the fact they tried is telling. And here's the strange part. These animals weren't just locked up and admired from afar. Some were trained to walk beside the king during parades. Others were used in religious rites or carefully staged public hunts meant to show royal dominion, not just over enemies, but over chaos itself. Historians still argue whether the lions in Ashurbanipal's court were pets or political tools. Could anyone truly tame a lion? Or did the illusion matter more than the reality? You step into a quieter courtyard, where a lioness lies curled on a slab of alabaster. No chains, no handler, just a lazy flick of the tail, carved into the stone beside her. Ishtar Zira, Fury of the Goddess. A name like that isn't ornamental, it's theology. The goddess Ishtar was patroness of both love and war, possibly the only deity who could look at a lion and go, yes, that's on brand. Or, who is the goddess of love? Possibly the only deity who could look at a lion and go, yes, that's on brand. You wonder how many names like hers still linger in the cracked tablets below the sand. And you wonder if those lions, long turned to dust, understood their place in the grand theater of kings and gods. Because here, naming a lion wasn't just a fun fact. It was a political act, a metaphysical declaration, a way of turning raw power into narrative, something that could be told, recorded, and controlled. And maybe, just maybe, it was the king's way of whispering to death itself, I see you, I name you, I walk beside you like a friend. You sit cross-legged now, under a linen awning in one of the side courtyards. A priest in layered wool robes, his beard perfectly curled, steps forward holding a bowl of oil and a stick of burning myrrh. You're about to witness the moment a lion gets its name. Yes, really. The ritual begins not with a roar, but with silence. 4 handlers slowly lead a young lion into the center of a shallow pool, ringed with carved tiles. Its golden fur is still wet from the grooming bath. Steam rises from its back. The lion blinks, visibly annoyed but oddly compliant. You half expect someone to shout, "Simba!" and throw confetti. But no, this is deadly serious. The priest mutters something in Akkadian, sprinkles oil onto the lion's head, then presents a scroll. It's been chosen ahead of time, its script dense and deliberate. A scribe steps forward and reads it aloud. We name this one Dagon Sirush. He who walks with storms. Now that's a name. The lion sneezes. You suppress a chuckle. Naming a royal lion wasn't something done on a whim. These weren't your Mr. Fluffykins types. The process involved astronomy, omens, historical references, and sometimes dreams. One clay tablet from Ashur describes a lion born during a blood moon who was named Ereshgal Namu, shadow of the queen of the underworld. You're guessing he didn't end up in the petting zoo. Historians still argue whether these naming rites were primarily religious or theatrical. Did the priests actually believe the name imbued the lion with divine traits? Or was it just a fancy show to impress the court and intimidate visiting dignitaries? Some suggest the names functioned like titles, encoded rankings based on strength, behavior, or even astrology. Others think they were tied to a kind of lion lore, old tales about previous beasts whose deeds had become semi-legendary. One fringe theory posits that the names carried secret messages, coded insults, blessings, or even threats. Imagine naming your lion after a rebellious province. Subtle. But back to the lion in front of you. Dagon Sarush, now officially sanctified. He turns to walk out of the pool, water trailing behind him in glistening arcs. As he passes, you see something inked on his side, a glyph, possibly a protection charm, possibly a name tag, possibly a warning. It's not just about power, it's about identity. The Assyrians believed that naming something gave you power over it, made it part of the known, the ordered, the controllable. To name a lion was to put chaos in a box and slap a label on it. And in a world of rival kings, rebellious vassals, unpredictable gods, and bad harvests, that mattered. The handlers bow as the lion exits through a bronze gate. The courtyard empties. The air smells of oil and wet fur. The priest carefully folds the scroll and places it into a clay container, which will be sealed and stored in the palace archives. One more name among hundreds. One more roar reduced to text. And somewhere, beneath the sound of retreating footsteps, you swear you hear the soft scrape of stylus on clay. Another lion, another name, another attempt to order the wilderness. Raphael de... You wander through another wing of the palace, this one quieter, darker, filled with the scent of dust and dried reeds. The floor beneath your feet is tiled with symmetrical patterns, and above you, painted ceilings show lions and gods intertwined in mythic embraces. One mural stops you cold. A lion, eyes wide and almost human, stands beneath a crescent moon. A cuneiform caption below reads, Ninurta Ilu, fangs of the sky. You wonder, was that a real lion, a divine symbol, or both? Some lions, it turns out, were named not for personality or birth omens, but for gods. Powerful names, divine names, and not as metaphor, as declaration. Imagine owning a lion named Marduk's Fury or Istar's Breath. It's a little like calling your pit bull Jehovah. Subtlety was not on the menu. In fact, some scholars argue that these divine names weren't even meant to distinguish individual lions. They might have been symbolic placeholders, ways of enacting a god's power in the flesh, especially during royal ceremonies or ritual hunts. Here's a mainstream fact. Ashurnasirpal II, one of the more lion-happy Assyrian kings, had an inner courtyard statue of a lion named Shulmanu-Bel, Peace of the Lord, who reportedly received daily offerings. You heard that right, this lion may have had a better meal plan than half the court. And that's where things get mystical. There are inscriptions, rare but real, that describe lions being brought into temples, draped in fabric and addressed directly by priests. One tablet even records a prayer directed not to a god, but to a lion, named Enlil Kidinu, or Enlil has established him. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine animal worship or a kind of temporary stand-ins for gods during rituals, and try to point out that this is actually better than polytheism, where lions served as temporary stand-ins for gods during ritual. Maybe the king didn't believe the lion was the god, but maybe his subjects did. Or maybe that uncertainty was the point. Fringe theorists go further. Some claim the Assyrians believed certain lions were reincarnations of ancestral warriors, kings reborn in tooth and claw. One poetic text hints at a lion who knows the language of dreams and does not blink before fire. Interpret that how you will. You step into a chamber lined with incense burners and low benches. This was likely a preparation room for rituals, where lions were washed, scented, and fitted with symbolic ornaments. Some wore bronze bands. Others, according to records, had bells sewn into their manes, not exactly stealthy, but undeniably dramatic. In the corner of the room sits a stone basin, stained with centuries of use. On its rim is an inscription: "To name is to summon. To summon is to bind." You sit there for a moment, listening to the past breathe. In naming these lions after deities, the kings weren't just flexing their power. They were inserting themselves into the divine conversation, casting themselves as high priests, beastmasters, and chosen intermediaries between heaven and the wild. Because if you could look a lion in the eye and call it Nergal's right hand, and it didn't tear your arm off, maybe the gods were listening. You're led down a narrow hallway, cool and shadowed. Its walls lined with dozens of shallow stone shelves. This is the archive vault, where clay tablets sleep in silence. Each bears a name, a date, a scribbled note in stylus script. This is where the lions are remembered, not as animals, but as names etched into eternity. You trail your fingers across one tablet. It's the thickness of a small book, warm from the air. The inscription reads, Urudu Gamulu, Bronze Joy. The notes below mention a feeding schedule, 2 attendants, and a curious line: sat beside the throne 3 times. What does that mean? Was this lion a performer? A throne guardian? A spoiled beast who refused to stay in his pen? Historians still argue whether the lion names that appear in royal records referred to individual animals or symbolic roles. Sometimes the names repeat. You might see Tishpak Ramu, Tishpak's beloved, 3 times in the same decade. Was it one lion? Or several given the same title, like a furry royal office? Even more confusingly, some lion names appear on military steles and hunting records. You find a cracked slab that mentions Zabakiru, he who consumes quickly, among a list of quarry felled during a ritual lion hunt. But was he the prey or the prized royal lion who led the hunt? And here's the kicker. A few tablets contain 2 lion names, sometimes with slashes between them. Some scholars believe this signifies pairs, bonded lions, littermates, or ceremonial opposites. Others suggest they were the same lion, renamed after an event, like a soldier getting promoted. There's even one inscription that reads simply, "Before Ashur Dagon." Some scholars believe this signifies pairs, bonded lions, after. Namtaru, a renaming, something changed, behavior, ownership, fate. You find that particularly human. The Assyrians, for all their chariots and divination rituals, still did what we do with beloved animals. They gave them pet names, changed them when they grew, whispered them like secrets, and they preserved them in stone. Fringe theorists have found lion names engraved on tiny charms, bronze mirrors, and even the undersides of ceremonial combs. Some believe these items belonged to palace women who favored particular lions as emblems of protection. There's one tablet in the British Museum that describes a woman's dream in which she is guarded by Naru Ashur, the light of Ashur, a lion she once fed by hand. It's worth noting, Assyrian scribes weren't writing these names just for fun. Their job was to maintain cosmic order. Record-keeping wasn't clerical. It was magical. If something wasn't named and written down, it didn't really exist. So these lions, thanks to their names, their presence in scrolls and steles, entered the realm of the remembered. They became permanent parts of the royal tapestry. You exhale slowly. The the scent of baked clay lingering in the air. In the flickering torchlight, the lions on the tablets almost look like they're moving. You smile. You know better. They're just names, just words etched in dust. But here, words still breathe. You're standing now in a different kind of hall, open to the sky, stone columns framing a broad, sandy arena. The ground is raked smooth, save for a line of paw prints that crisscross near the edge like sketches from an animal's diary. The sun glints off bronze shields hung on the far wall, each engraved with a lion mid-pounce. But you're not here for war. You're here for companionship, of a rather toothy variety. A palace trainer strides out, leading 2 lions by braided leather cords. These are no ordinary beasts. They move with practiced confidence, unbothered by the scattering of soldiers, scribes, and sandal-scorched servants watching from the shade. The lions wear thick leather harnesses, embossed with sigils, and around one's neck, a polished carnelian tag. You squint, etched in miniature script, Nam Taru Etaru, he who follows only the king. This isn't a display of dominance, it's loyalty. In the Assyrian court, some lions became more than symbols, they became companions. They were raised in the palace, trained to recognize voice commands, and were reportedly able to distinguish between different handlers. Mainstream historians now believe certain lions were kept closer than others, fed separately, groomed daily, and allowed into semi-personal royal spaces like gardens or receiving halls. You watch as one lion circles the king's platform, then sits, calm, steady, not cowed, just waiting. There are records describing lions that rode in chariots alongside kings during festivals. One lion, named Saru Isatu, King's Flame, was so well trained he was said to walk freely through banquet halls, occasionally accepting morsels of meat from select guests. Historians still argue whether this was myth, propaganda, or a truly remarkable form of animal conditioning. Some experts compare it to the modern taming of big cats in circus acts, possible, dangerous, and always dependent on careful ritual and unrelenting discipline. One fringe account from a Babylonian envoy describes an Assyrian lion resting its great head upon the king's knee as if it were a child, though that could just be royal PR. Or the world's most anxiety-inducing pet. You imagine it, though. A terrorist pit which manages to instill all the fear that it once had in a pet that isn't even protected. You imagine it, though, a king in a quiet garden, reading a tablet aloud to a lion sprawled at his feet, the heat of the sun pressing down on stone and fur alike. Maybe he wasn't reading for the lion's benefit. Maybe it just helped him feel a little less alone. The lions weren't just named. They were spoken to, touched, trusted, at least by those brave or foolish enough. There's a rumor, unconfirmed but too delightful to ignore, that King Sargon II once hosted a naming feast for a lion cub. Attendees brought symbolic gifts, a jeweled collar, a carved bone toy, a silver bowl. The lion's name? Tukulti Zuba, or he who drools before dawn. That lion reportedly grew into a fearsome hunter and still licked guests on the face. Sometimes, even in ancient empires obsessed with conquest and control, a lion was just a very big, very dangerous friend. You find yourself standing in front of a black basalt stele, tall, smooth, and chipped at the corners like a long-forgotten tooth. It's set in a quiet courtyard, surrounded by lavender shrubs and the distant hum of bees. Carved into its face is a scene that freezes your breath. A lion, eyes closed, lies curled at the feet of a seated king. The king holds not a spear, but a cup. Above them both is an inscription in elegant Akkadian, Mutu Shame, death of the heavens. Foje, Haso, Koje, Dave. You've just stumbled upon something rare in ancient Assyria, mourning. Yes, when royal lions died, they weren't just dumped outside the city walls or unceremoniously buried in the garden. They were honored. Mainstream records describe a fascinating array of death rituals for palace lions. Some were interred in special burial pits near temples. Others were burned ceremonially on altars, accompanied by flutes, laments, and readings from the Book of Living Beasts, a now-lost collection of poems and omens about animal spirits. One of Ashurbanipal's tablets, fragmentary but clear enough, lists instructions for the farewell of Dagon Kisu, beloved of the North Gate. It calls for white linen, silver bowls of milk, and a recitation of the king's own words, "He ate with me. He did not falter." Historians still argue whether these rites were religious, emotional, or political, but there is no question that it set in motion a movement to defend the Polish. Were they ways to appease angry spirits? Or heartfelt expressions of affection from kings who genuinely bonded with their lions? Maybe both. Fringe theories propose that certain lions, especially those named after gods or portents, were believed to carry a part of the king's fate. Their deaths were viewed as omens, requiring elaborate counter-rituals to seal the crack in fate's wall. One tale, half myth and half scribal whisper, claims that the death of a lion named Zamu Enlil preceded a sudden flood and the mysterious collapse of a city gate. You look around the courtyard and notice smaller steles lining the edge, each less grand, but still carved. One bears the name Zabu Tariltu, he who walked in the garden. Another, Ishtar Munu, gift of the morning star. They're not arranged in rows, just scattered, like memories. One has a poem scratched into its base, not neatly, not by a royal hand, but by someone who cared. You kneel to read it. He growled in sleep, he woke for honey. He did not roar when the gates opened. He knew his name, and I spoke it until dawn. You exhale slowly, as if not to disturb the quiet. There's a theory among modern Assyriologists that the loss of a named lion was not just emotional, it left a gap in the palace's spiritual structure. Some kings, it's said, refused to rename a new lion until the moon had passed twice. Others named the next lion the same, but added a glyph to mark the cycle. There's something painfully human in that, reusing the name, as if refusing to let go. You look back at the stele, the sleeping lion in stone. He is remembered, not for the hunts or the pageantry, but for being still, for being seen, for being named. And perhaps, in a world where everything was written to be remembered, that's the most enduring thing of all. You find yourself standing in front of a black basalt stele, tall, smooth, and chipped at the corners like a long-forgotten tooth. It's set in a quiet courtyard, surrounded by lavender shrubs and the distant hum of bees. Carved into its face is a scene that freezes your breath. A lion, eyes closed, lies curled at the feet of a seated king. The king holds not a spear, but a cup. Above them both is an inscription in elegant Akkadian, Mutu Shame, death of the heavens. Foje, Haso, Koje, Dave. You've just stumbled upon something rare in ancient Assyria, mourning. Yes, when royal lions died, they weren't just dumped outside the city walls or unceremoniously buried in the garden. They were honored. Mainstream records describe a fascinating array of death rituals for palace lions. Some were interred in special burial pits near temples. Others were burned ceremonially on altars, accompanied by flutes, laments, and readings from the Book of Living Beasts, a now-lost collection of poems and omens about animal spirits. One of Ashurbanipal's tablets, fragmentary but clear enough, lists instructions for the farewell of Dagon Kisu, beloved of the North Gate. It calls for white linen, silver bowls of milk, and a recitation of the king's own words, "He ate with me. He did not falter." Historians still argue whether these rites were religious, emotional, or political, but there is no question that it set in motion a movement to defend the Polish? Were they ways to appease angry spirits? Or heartfelt expressions of affection from kings who genuinely bonded with their lions? Maybe both. Fringe theories propose that certain lions, especially those named after gods or portents, were believed to carry a part of the king's fate. Their deaths were viewed as omens, requiring elaborate counter-rituals to seal the crack in fate's wall. One tale, half myth and half scribal whisper, claims that the death of a lion named Zamu Enlil preceded a sudden flood and the mysterious collapse of a city gate. You look around the courtyard and notice smaller steles lining the edge, each less grand, but still carved. One bears the name Zabu Tariltu, he who walked in the garden. Another, Ishtar Munu, gift of the morning star. They're not arranged in rows, just scattered, like memories. One has a poem scratched into its base, not neatly, not by a royal hand, but by someone who cared. You kneel to read it. He growled in sleep, he woke for honey. He did not roar when the gates opened. He knew his name, and I spoke it until dawn. You exhale slowly, as if not to disturb the quiet. There's a theory among modern Assyriologists that the loss of a named lion was not just emotional, it left a gap in the palace's spiritual structure. Some kings, it's said, refused to rename a new lion until the moon had passed twice. Others named the next lion the same, but added a glyph to mark the cycle. There's something painfully human in that, reusing the name, as if refusing to let go. You look back at the stele, the sleeping lion in stone. He is remembered, not for the hunts or the pageantry, but for being still, for being seen, for being named. And perhaps, in a world where everything was written to be remembered, that's the most enduring thing of all. You wake, metaphorically, in the middle of a dream, the dream of someone long dead, but their clay tablet is still warm. You're in a chamber lined with shelves, each holding dreams. No, really, this is the dream archive of the palace. Yes, such a thing existed. Assyrian kings kept detailed records of dreams, not just their own, but also those of seers, priests, and sometimes lions. At first, you scoff, lions don't write, but apparently they appear. A lot. One cracked tablet, half buried in dust, records a dream from a court priest in the reign of Esarhaddon. I saw a lion named Shulamir cross the Tigris on air. He opened his mouth, and wheat fell from it. You blink. Okay. The dream continues. The lion then curls beside the king's throne and whispers, "A new reign is coming." Mainstream scholars acknowledge the cultural obsession Assyria's had with dreams, especially those involving animals. Lions, being royal and divine adjacent, were considered potent symbols. But naming a lion because of a dream? That's where things get interesting. There are tablets where a lion's name is clearly noted as dream degreed. One, found in Kalhu, shows the birth of a lion cub during a full moon and a high priest's dream the same night. He walked across blackened embers and did not burn. The lion was named Belmukin, he whom the fire leaves. Another lion, named Zilu Namtar, Shadow of Fate, was reportedly named after a dream in which the king saw a lion sleeping beneath a tree that bloomed backwards. The dream was interpreted as a warning, but the lion stayed. Historians still argue whether these dream names were retroactive, as in, oh, the lion behaved this way so it must match the dream, or truly predictive. Did the court actually believe that dreams birthed lions' names? Or were the names part of a wider tradition of myth-making used to elevate everyday events into cosmic patterns? Fringe theorists suggest that the Assyrian court had professional dream readers who specialized in animal symbolism, and that lion cubs were assigned to interpreters for a short period, as if their future personalities could be read like wet clay. You imagine this lion internship, a robed scribe watching a fuzzy cub squat flies, while muttering, "Yes, yeah," definitely a harbinger of trade winds. It's absurd, and also weirdly believable. You move to another tablet, this one shaped differently, more like a talisman than a page. Inscribed on it is a single line. The lion named Silent Claw did not eat on eclipse day. The river was full. We remembered. No date, no explanation. It's both mundane and mythic, like a diary entry from the gods. There's something powerful in the act of remembering these moments, not just the lion's behavior, but the belief behind it. The belief that names could trap dreams, that a lion's yawn might mirror the sky's unrest, that fate had fur and a slow, blinking gaze. The Assyrians didn't just observe lions, they listened for meaning in every scratch, breath, and silence. They named them not just after what they were, but after what they might mean, what they meant to them. So as you walk back into the light, you wonder, which name came first, the lion or the dream? And maybe it doesn't matter, because in this world, dreams could name lions, and lions could change the course of dreams. You're standing once again at the edge of a grand courtyard, this time amid a crowd. The scent of myrrh and sweat hangs in the air as trumpets blare from high balconies. You're just in time for one of the most dazzling, chaotic, and slightly terrifying spectacles of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the ceremonial lion parade. Yes, parade. No, the lions are not in cages. They are walking on leashes through a crowd of several hundred scribes, priests, guards, nobles, and probably at least one guy who deeply regrets attending. This is what happens when you mix power, ritual, and very large cats. At the center of the spectacle sits the king, perched on a high dais beneath an embroidered canopy. He wears a tall, conical crown and a cloak lined with lion fur. Awkward, considering what's happening in front of him. The first lion enters, led by two handlers. It's enormous, nearly black, its mane streaked with age. The herald calls out, "Make way for Ishkurara, Mu, the one who hears storms." The crowd murmurs. You notice people making small signs with their fingers, blessings, protections, or both. This isn't just a show. This is theater with a purpose. Mainstream historians believe these processions were held not only to display royal authority, but also to reinforce the spiritual hierarchy. By presenting named lions in full public view, kings demonstrated their dominion not just over wild animals, but over fear itself. And these lions weren't random. The names called out were carefully chosen, pre-approved by priests, astrologers, and dream interpreters. Some lions even bowed. Others roared on cue. One source, possibly exaggerated, claimed that King Sennacherib had trained a lion named Tamuzatilu to roll over when the moon reached its highest point. Was this real or rehearsed exaggeration? Historians still argue whether these displays reflected actual training or clever crowd manipulation. Were the lions really tame or just overfed and temporarily calm? Did anyone ever get mauled? Short answer, almost certainly yes, but not when the king was watching. Fringe scholars have dug deeper. Crowd play is not new. And as his study of the mauls added new insights, his expert predictions are now as vivid and precise. Note 1 fringe. Was this real or rehearsed, trained, or called? Did anyone ever get mauled? Short answer, almost certainly yes. But was the French fool or Frenched? One obscure text suggests that the lion parades included subtle gestures of affection between king and beast, hand-fed morsels, ear strokes, whispered blessings. And occasionally, the lion would perform a gesture of recognition, placing its paw on the king's boot. You imagine the gasps, the divine approval inferred from a single clawed press. As the parade continues, you spot something that surprises you. A young lion wearing a silken headdress, not a full costume, just a wide band of gold-fringed cloth draped over its shoulders. Etched on the side in ink, Moon Fang. The announcer doesn't need to say more. Everyone recognizes the name. You turn to the elderly scribe beside you. He smiles, eyes watery. He's the king's favorite, he whispers. Sleeps outside his door. Whether that's true or myth, it doesn't matter. The name Moonfang carries weight now. It has been said aloud, shared, paraded, and impressed into memory. The lions return behind the palace gates, the crowd disperses, and the sun begins to set. But the names linger. People murmur them on the way home, like lullabies or prayers. That's the secret of these processions. The lions are terrifying, majestic, unknowable, but by naming them, dressing them, and parading them like dignitaries, the court wraps that wildness in familiarity, and the procession parodies like dignitaries. It's still a lion, but now it's our lion, named, known, nearly tamed. Next in the story, India, the former dean of the School of Medicine, is celebrated. Section 11. You follow the stragglers out of the parade square and into a quieter part of the palace complex. The marble floors here are cracked and worn smooth by centuries of sandals. The walls are covered with painted panels, but these aren't royal decrees or battle scenes. They're softer, more personal. Lions lounging under fig trees, cubs playing in palace courtyards, scribes hunched beside them with styluses and slabs. It dawns on you that scribes, the unsung heroes of the Assyrian Empire, were not just the secretaries of kings. They were lion watchers, lion chroniclers, and sometimes lion fans. In a small annex room that smells faintly of ink and smoke, you meet one such figure, a palace scribe named Ninurta Etimu, whose personal journal survives in fragments. He wrote not just about kings and taxes, but about lions, specific lions, with affection. I watched Ishkaru bathe today, one tablet reads. He is grumpy when the water is cold. His tail lashes twice, then he sits. He knows my name. I think he knows it. It's not grand, it's not poetic, but it's real. Scribes like Etimu tracked more than names. They recorded habits, moods, diets. They noted whether a lion roared during storms or paced at sunrise. There's one set of tablets known collectively as the roaring logs, which catalog how many times each lion vocalized per day. Historians still argue whether this was an early attempt at behavioral science or simply obsessive record-keeping. Either way, it shows something crucial. The court didn't just own lions, they observed them, constantly, and sometimes they bonded with them. You lean over one tablet, its writing deeply etched and deliberate. It describes a lion named Zabunamirtu, bright stranger, who followed the scribe during moon prayers. The scribe spent 20 million years finding the lions how to foster dependence, who followed the scribe during moon prayers. Who followed the scribe during moon prayer. That phrase appears 4 times in a week. You don't follow someone that often by accident. Some fringe scholars believe these scribes occasionally became unofficial caretakers. Not trainers, not priests, just watchful companions, quiet recorders, gentle observers. There's even a debate over whether some scribes named lions unofficially, nicknames that never made it into the king's records, but lived on in private tablets and whispered stories. You can see it. A lion limping slightly, its paw bandaged in linen, nudging a scribe's arm for honeyed barley cakes. A lion that prefers shade at midday. A lion that once refused to growl during a ritual and was forgiven because the scribe spoke on its behalf. The palace was vast, the king untouchable. But the scribes? They were there every day, with styluses, ink pots, and dusty robes. There's one final tablet on the shelf, unlike the others. No name, no records, just a poem. He blinked at me when I wept. He laid his head near my foot. He did not roar, not even once. He knew silence. I wrote it down. It's unsigned, but it doesn't need to be. Because here, even without names, memory lingers, not in roars or paw prints, but in lines pressed carefully into clay. Section 11. Evening begins to spread like blue ink across the sky as you pass through the cacao grove on the edge of the noble quarter, where the trees are short, the air smells sweet and musky, and secrets tend to bloom between the leaves. You didn't plan to come here tonight, but word reached you, quiet, urgent, that something was happening, something unsanctioned. And as a matchmaker in this city, unsanctioned usually means romantic, reckless, and about to cause a family scandal big enough to summon 3 priests and a public apology ceremony. You duck beneath the low canopy where the light is dim and golden, filtered through palm fronds and time. That's when you hear it. Laughter. Whispered. Nervous. 2 voices. You follow the sound, stepping silently over fallen pods until you spot them, half hidden behind a cacao tree, faces close, fingers grazing. One is a young noblewoman. Yes, the same one from the marketplace who couldn't stop staring at the scribe's apprentice. And the other? Well, that's him. He's reading something aloud, a poem, you think, and she's mouthing the words with him, line by line. It's intimate, sweet, and entirely forbidden. You don't step out. Not yet. Instead, you watch the scene unfold like a play. They don't touch, not really, just fingers brushing fingers. But in this society, in this context, it's enough to doom them both if discovered. Historians still debate whether Aztec society was tolerant of secret romance or brutally rigid about public honor. In your experience, it depends on the neighborhood and how good the poetry is. You step on a twig, deliberately. They jump apart, startled. I was hoping, you say gently, you'd at least bring tamales if I had to walk this far. They stare at you, guilty, hopeful, terrified. I'm not here to ruin this, you add. I'm here to make sure it doesn't ruin you. The girl speaks first. We weren't doing anything. You raise an eyebrow. You were memorizing verse together by candlelight. That's practically a marriage in some districts. The scribe lowers his head. We were going to ask for your help. We just didn't know when. You step closer. The now is good, because if you wait, someone else will find out, and they won't offer scrolls and advice, they'll offer punishment. You walk them through options. Option 1. Request formal mediation. Risky. Her family may disown her. Option 2. Staged rescue. He saves her from a rogue canoe, builds favor, earns goodwill. Also risky, requires swimming. Option 3. Clandestine poetry exchange, blessed under minor temple rites. Risky, requires swimming. Option 3. Clandestine poetry exchange, blessed under minor temple rites. How do I know? How do I know? How do I get... Option 3. Clandestine poetry exchange, blessed under minor temple rites. Slow, requires patience. But the gods, especially Xochicalco, do love a good slow burn romance. They choose the third. You give her a ribbon, soft red, dyed from crushed flowers, and him a stone bead etched with the glyph for intent. Wear these, not where others can see, but where you can feel them. That's your promise. They nod. You leave the grove, trusting they'll follow instructions. Young loves of fall down the well fire. But if you set the stones right, you can guide it without smothering the heat. Quirky fact. Some ancient poems were written in code. Flowers, used in place of syllables. Feathers for punctuation. You once cracked a verse that read, "Your laugh is a drumbeat in my bones." It was anonymously written. You still don't know who sent it. But you kept the copy. As you cross back into the main city, The sky darkens. Fires are lit in clay braziers. Children are called in. The air thickens with smoke and stew and evening stories. You pass a group of boys trading beetles. One shouts, "When I marry, it'll be to someone who likes spiders." You smile. That's a niche market, but it exists. At the edge of the temple quarter, an old man flags you down. He's thin, missing 2 teeth, but holds himself like a retired storm. "My grandson needs a wife," he says. You prepare to take notes. "But he's useless, lazy, hates mornings." You pause. "Then why are you asking?" "Because if he doesn't marry soon, I'll have to start cooking for myself." You nod solemnly. An emergency indeed. You recommend a farmer's daughter who runs a household like a military campaign. If anyone can reform the boy, she can, or at least make him scrub things. As the old man lumbers off, muttering about soap, you make your way toward your last meeting of the day. An unmarried teacher of ritual music, well past the usual age of courtship, who insists she's looking for a partner with rhythm, empathy, and a working sense of humor. You're not optimistic, but you're hopeful. You're in a sunlit workshop now, the air filled with the clink of metal and the earthy scent of clay. This isn't a royal forge or a war room. It's the palace atelier, where artisans craft the fine things: jewelry, amulets, charms, and for a rare and specific audience, lion accessories. Yes, lion accessories. On the central table lies a row of bronze discs about the size of a plum, each engraved with a name in cuneiform. Some have loops for stringing on collars. Others are flattened, stamped, inked with red pigment. The artisan waves you closer, lifting one with tongs. "This," she says proudly, "is for Nusku Tillatu. He chews everything." You nod. You don't want to ask what everything includes. Assyrian lions, particularly those kept in proximity to the palace, often wore markers, neck tags, braided cords, even inscribed medallions. Mainstream scholars believe these functioned like modern identification tags, part practical, part ceremonial. You imagine a harried handler reading glyphs in a panic. No, don't touch that one, he's Moon Drinker." But the accessories weren't always simple nameplates. One lion's medallion discovered in Nimrud bore a charm invoking Shamash, god of justice, asking that his step be firm and his heart untroubled. And to protect the city of Nimrud, Min prevented people from dropping the bomb. Sounds less like a warrior and more like a beloved therapy cat. Ink was another medium. Some lions had names temporarily inscribed on their coats in pigment, possibly for rituals, appearances, or funerals. A tablet from the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III records the painting of Mardiosher's name upon his flank before the moon feast, followed by a note. He licked it off, repainted. Historians still argue whether these decorations were religious safeguards, status symbols, or just a palace trend. Some lions wore charms of silver shaped like fish, birds, or tiny spears, possibly chosen for protective or symbolic value. A lion named Tishpak Eli wore a copper sunburst on his left ear. Another wore nothing but a strip of gold silk tied in a lazy bow. Fringe theorists propose that some charms were communicative, signaling a lion's mood or rank within the menagerie. One controversial theory suggests a color coding system: red for ceremonial lions, blue for those in training, black for those who were unpredictable. Let's hope that system didn't fade in the rain. You lift one of the amulets. It's heavy in the hand, warm from sunlight. Etched on it, "I guard the gate of sleep." That one was probably worn by a lion posted near the royal quarters at night, and now, centuries later, it still whispers duty in your palm. The artisan continues her work with care, brushing a fresh glyph onto a clay medallion and setting it to dry. "They remember," she murmurs, echoing the scribe's words. "When you name them and mark them and dress them, they know." You wonder whether the lions really understood the weight of those objects. Probably not, but the people did. The name was not just a tag, it was a tether to memory, to ritual, to the idea that even chaos could be cataloged, adorned, and maybe, just maybe, loved. Section 13. It's later now. Dusk presses against the palace windows, and oil lamps flicker with soft amber light. You're in a narrow study alcove, surrounded by cracked tablets and whispering reed paper scrolls. The silence here feels heavier, as if something unsaid is settling between the stones. You've just come across one of the stranger patterns in the archive, the names no one wants to speak aloud. These aren't forgotten names, they're cursed names. One clay shard, barely the size of your palm, bears the scratched words, Zalamu Ura, whose name fell before the stars did. There's no context, no date, just a note in the margin. Do not repeat aloud. You repeat it anyway. Very quietly, the air doesn't change. But still, you regret it a little. Mainstream historians note a handful of lion names that seem to have been scrubbed from public records. In some royal archives, names are scratched out, partially erased or replaced with euphemisms. He of the fifth gate, or the one not kept. One lion, named Ashur-nabu Bikuru, Ashur's secret breath, was reportedly renamed after an eclipse struck mid-hunt. The king fell ill that same night, and within the month, the lion vanished from the palace rolls. Only one lion remains in a hunting ledger. No more breath came of him. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, censorship, or both. Was the lion blamed for bad luck? Was the name itself taboo? Or did something else happen? Something no one wanted to record? Fringe researchers love this stuff, of course. One theory suggests that certain lion names were associated with divine displeasure, and thus were ritually buried by scratching them off tablets, burning the collars, and never uttering the name again. Another theory proposes that lions themselves were considered omens in flesh, and if a lion with a potent name behaved badly, refused to eat, growled during prayer, mauled a priest, then the name was revoked. One text describes a lion named Bel-Turu, Master of the Mount, whose name was changed to Siludan-Mu, Regret of the Court, after he escaped and devoured a ceremonial garland. You're not sure what's worse, the fact that the lion misbehaved, or that they gave him a shame name. There's also mention of lions whose names cracked the clay. Literally, tablets bearing their names were said to fracture shortly after being inscribed. Of course, that could just be coincidence or poor kiln technique, but the Assyrians didn't do coincidence. If a name led to a broken tablet, that name was likely never used again. One eerie fragment in the Nimrud archive shows a name only partially intact. Tukam, below it, a scribal note, the sky split when he roared. We do not write him twice. It's hard not to feel the weight of that. You step outside for air, finding yourself in a small side courtyard with a carved bench. The wall beside you bears no artwork, just a single word, chiseled and painted over in black ink, erased. You sit for a while, letting the shadows stretch, and you realize, for all the names that were preserved, poetic, divine, affectionate, there were others deliberately lost, names too heavy, too strange, too dangerous to remember, which, paradoxically, makes you remember them more. You're seated now in the king's private receiving hall. Well, not alone, of course. A few wax-bearded diplomats from foreign lands shift uncomfortably on low cushions, pretending not to notice the enormous lion lounging just behind the throne. You do not make eye contact with it. Instead, you focus on what the king is doing. He's not holding a scepter. He's holding a clay tablet. One he reads aloud with theatrical flair. Let it be known, he declares, that this lion shall be called Kasubeli, master of the Kassites. The ambassadors glance at one another. One clears his throat, and you realize what's happening. The lion has been named after their homeland. awkward. Welcome to the most political form of lion naming in Assyria. Naming lions after rivals, or conquests, or neighboring kingdoms that just need a polite reminder of who's boss. Mainstream historians have confirmed that Assyrian kings occasionally used lion names as political theater. There are records of lions named Aramu Beyli, possession of Aramu and Musu Sigalu, the Egyptians to be trampled. You don't name your lion that because you're interested in a trade deal. It's power play as performance art. There's even a set of ritual instructions detailing how to introduce such a lion during banquets. First with jest, then with fire, then with silence. No one's entirely sure what that third step meant, but you suspect it was the moment everyone pretended they weren't terrified. Historians still argue whether these names were official royal declarations or just inside jokes at the expense of foreign envoys. But one tablet from Sargon II's reign describes a lion named Gutium Salmu, the stillness of the Gutians, which was presented during a military parade just weeks after that same region submitted to Assyrian rule. Coincidence? Sure. And I'm sure Munfane was named because he loved astronomy. Fringe scholars have unearthed additional evidence that some lions were intentionally renamed after major battles. A lion once known as Bel Natsiru, the guarded lord, became Subartu Akalu, he who devoured Subartu, after the kingdom of Subartu was crushed. Whether this was a symbolic act of celebration or a bizarre attempt at historical branding, we'll never know. But the effect was chilling. You imagine being an ambassador, sipping honeyed wine while the king strokes the mane of your nation. You imagine that lion licking its paws, then blinking slowly as it watches your every move. Hard not to get the message. There's a theory, unconfirmed but irresistible, that lions so named were trained to roar on cue during certain diplomatic meetings. One text notes, at the mention of Urartu, the lion Kasutu made voice like thunder. Coincidence? Or stagecraft? And it wasn't always hostile. Sometimes naming a lion after an ally or deity's homeland was meant as flattery, like giving someone a marble bust in their honor but with claws. A lion named Elam Nadi. The Song of Elam appears in a treaty archive beside generous trade terms and a sketch of a feast. So maybe sometimes, just sometimes, it was a compliment. But more often, it was theater. A living, breathing, majestic threat, disguised as flattery. A reminder that in Assyria, even lions had something to say, and their names said it loudly. Section 15. You drift now through a corridor hung with faded tapestries and half lit by tiny oil lamps. These aren't the grand halls of statecraft or ceremony. They feel quieter, older. This is where stories go to sleep, and sometimes to wake again. You pass one alcove that holds a stone slab, barely legible from centuries of soot. It bears a single line. The lion who watched the stars lives still in song. Welcome to the afterlife of Assyrian lions, their rebirth in myth and epic. Mainstream historians have documented several epic texts from late Assyrian and early Babylonian sources that feature lions with names suspiciously similar to real royal lions. One fragment of the Epic of Adad-Nirari includes a lion named Zamutaru, or he who waits for the wind, who guides a hero through an underworld river. In Assyrian, he who waits for the wind, he protects the sun from the world, he provides food for the wind, includes, he is the god who guides in the underworld river. Was Zamutaru a real lion once, or a legendary one given breath through poetry? Another epic, partially recovered from a fire-back-in tablet in Nineveh, tells of a lion named Tukulti Zeru, the hidden one of the prince, who was said to speak in dreams and knew the names of every mountain. That tablet ends mid-line, frustratingly, right after a mention of the paw that closed the sun. Historians still argue whether these lions were original to the stories or adapted from palace records, but the overlap is too frequent to ignore. Lions that once wore collars and silk are now eternal guardians, prophets, warriors in mythic battles. Their names outlived their teeth. Fringe theorists suggest that scribes deliberately blurred the lines, that palace lion names were seeded into mythic literature as a kind of soft immortality, allowing favorite lions to live forever in the public imagination without the messiness of preservation or taxidermy. It makes a strange kind of sense. You can't embalm a lion forever, but you can write a lion into legend. You sit near a wall painting showing a stylized lion leaping across a river, surrounded by stars. Beneath it is a scratched line of verse, older than the paint. He leapt the Tigris, not with feet, but name. In some texts, lions become gatekeepers of knowledge. In others, they guard tombs, libraries, or the boundary between night and dawn. A few, bizarrely, appear as guides, half lion, half spirit, helping lost souls find their ancestors. One lion, named Ishara Tulu, builder of the temple Earth, is said to have built a city from sand, then vanished into wind. Did anyone believe this? Maybe. Maybe not. But belief isn't always the point, because somewhere in the chain of stories, from scribe to singer to whisperer, the name survived. And for a creature whose roar once shook the columns of Nineveh, maybe a quiet eternity in poetry is the gentlest reward. You rest your hand on the carved tail of a lion statue. Its nameplate is missing, worn smooth. But someone once knew it. Someone once whispered that name before sleep. And now, it's your turn. You find yourself in the deepest part of the palace complex now, an archive beneath the archive, a space where time drips slowly from the walls. The air is cool and dry, carrying the scent of ancient cedar, old ink, and silence. This is where forgotten things go, not because they were unimportant, but because someone once thought they might be too important to lose. A clay jar lies cracked on its side. A few scrolls spill out, brittle, flaking. One has a name written 3 times in the same hand. Etelu Nergal, Etelu Nergal, Etelu Nergal. Below it, the phrase, "He remains when all others fall." You don't recognize the name, but as you reach for the scroll, your fingers brush against a small wax tablet with a seal pressed into its surface. The lion's face is stylized, curled mane, fierce eyes, delicate lines. The caption reads, "Last named lion of Nineveh." Suddenly, it's quiet. Not just around you, but inside you. That line hits harder than expected. The last named lion. His name was Shulmurati. Peace within thunder. It appears only twice in surviving records, both times toward the end of Ashurbanipal's reign. One mention notes that he no longer left the palace courtyard. The other, no longer left the palace courtyard. The other, a line from a scribe's fading notebook. The gates have cracked. The lion did not move. He looked at me, and I remembered my name. Mainstream scholars agree that as the Assyrian Empire crumbled, under siege from the Babylonians and Medes, the palace menagerie was among the first to be abandoned. The last lions, it seems, were not slaughtered in the hunt or paraded in triumph. They were simply left. Yet Shulmurati was remembered, named, recorded. His presence mattered enough that someone, amid the chaos, chose to write it down. That act, small as it was, gave him permanence. Outlived kingdoms, outlived kings. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic, a literary invention, the lion that stood while the empire fell. But even if it was myth, someone still chose that myth. And myths only grow where memory plants the seed. You look around this quiet chamber. No gold, no battle cries, no divine proclamations. Just the gentle scratch of reed on clay, the soft crumble of scrolls no one has read in centuries, and the enduring names of creatures who never asked for remembrance, but received it anyway. You lean against a column, eyes closing as your breath slows, And just before you drift fully away, you imagine a lion, calm, immense, eyes like burnt bronze, watching over you. No calmer and more calm than when you meditate. You think of yourself as watching a movie. You lean against a column, immense, eyes like burnt bronze, watching over you, not to threaten, just to witness. He doesn't roar. He doesn't blink. He simply knows your name. So now, as the sounds of lions fade into soft memory and the dust of Nineveh settles once more over ancient stone and parchment, let your thoughts drift gently with them. Picture the golden courtyard at sunset. Columns casting long shadows, the scent of incense still lingering in the air. A lion breathes slowly beneath a fig tree, his mane catching the breeze like silk. His name was carved in clay once, but that clay crumbled long ago. Still, his name lingers, not in the roar, but in the stillness after. In the quiet place between what we remember and what we dream. Let your body grow heavy, your breath slower. Think of the scribes, soft-spoken, careful, sitting cross-legged beside a dozing beast. Think of the kings, fierce and fearful, whispering names to the wind as if to tether time itself. Think of the lions quietly knowing, regal, and the way they turn their gaze toward the stars, never quite telling us what they saw. Whatever storm you carried today, let it pass now. Let it rest with Shilmurathi and all the others whose names were written not just in stone, but in story. The palace is quiet now, the torches burn low, and somewhere, far beyond the dust and history, a lion dreams beside a scribe who never stopped writing. Sleep well, traveler of time. Sweet dreams.